guests on Vinyl and Vision.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Vinyl and Vision. Here we are with episode 99. Today's very special guest is Curran Reynolds. I'm going to try to make this a very quick introduction. My guest tonight, Curran Reynolds, is the singer and songwriter for that band Body Stuff. It's the first full-length album by Body Stuff, but it is the fourth release and therefore, hence the name, Four. Curran is a well-established musician. He's been a musician for the majority of his life, and he's been in some notable acts as well, like such as Wet Nurse and Today Is the Day. But Body Stuff is the new project. He's also a publicist by day. That's his kind of day job. And so he is very intertwined into the music industry. I was very excited to have him on. He is a full-blown Jane's Addiction fanatic, and it was a no-brainer for him to choose the record Jane's Addiction, Nothing Shocking, to speak about today. So I was very excited to get into it. So without further ado, folks, I'm just going to go ahead and get you into the show. Just like to say first, thank you very much for tuning in, and if you can do the things you do with the internet, please like, share, subscribe, comment, rate, review, all of those things. We really do appreciate it, and we'll be coming back with our 100th episode very soon. Thank you, and enjoy. Curran Reynolds, is that you? There you are. How's it going, man?
Good. How are you, James?
Doing all right. It's finally starting to feel like spring around here.
Yeah, nice. Here as well. It's like 60s today, 70s tomorrow, up to the 80s at the end of the week.
Yep. It's just going to spiral. It's going to like spiral out of control and just get fucking obscene real fast.
I love that. I like it hot.
Yeah. How's the city? You like the city hot?
It's disgusting, but I also love that. Like I could just surrender to the grossness and just surrender to that different summer zone, you know?
Right. Yeah, you kind of just have to give in. Yeah, at a certain point, you just give in. You're like, fuck it. I'm gross. It's gross. It's just going to stay that way.
Yeah.
So what's been going on, man?
I come from Maine. So like when I was a young kid through high school, I was in Maine, which is a beautiful place. And for part of that time, we were out in the country in rural parts. And then my dad was he was out in the country in Kansas. So I had all that background. By the time I came to New York City when I was 17, you know, I had all that. So it's sort of a nice balance, and they still live out there. So it's like, I can visit those places, but I guess that helps me like surrender to New York City vibes because I have those places to go to as well.
Yeah. Have you so you were born and raised in Maine?
I was born in rural Maryland.
Okay.
And then my folks split up, and my sister and my mom and I moved to Maine when I was like 5. And my dad moved to rural Kansas at the same time. So,
okay. Wow. It's a big divide, huh?
That was a big divide. Yeah. Yeah. That was difficult. But yeah, they had traveled all over the world up to that point. Like Maryland was one of many, many stops. They were in Australia, New Zealand, Toronto, Canada, out in Iowa, out in upstate New York. So they were just all over the place. And
yeah. Why were they doing so much moving?
I think they were just freewheeling young people, children of the 60s. You know, by that point it was the 70s, but still in that sort of freewheeling mindset. And also my dad was he was an archaeologist or wanting to be one. And so he was going from job to job in that field. Yeah, like digging up dinosaur bones or digging up colonial artifacts or whatever it was.
Right. Oh, wow. That's weird. What about your mom? What did she do?
All kinds of things. She helped open a daycare center in Iowa. She worked at a health food market in Maryland. She was a waitress. She was a baker of cakes. And then when they split up, she became an actress, and she started getting really into theater in Maine. And
Wow.
still, she's 74 now, and she's still acting and directing.
Really? So that's her passion. She kind of found it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wild. Huh. Do you get a little bit of that from her? I mean, because obviously you have to be a little bit of an outgoing person to be a musician type, right?
The older I get, I see it. Yeah. Like, I think we all probably are that way. Like, the older you get, you see the connections to your parents and all the similarities. And
Yeah, for better or for worse.
yeah. Yep. Yep. I
I
think,
hear you, man.
yeah, there's a theatrical streak that probably runs through us both. Yeah.
Right. So was that a weird transition, or were you dying for the city? Kind of being raised in the sticks like that.
Yeah, I had visited New York a couple times at that point, like when I was 11, 12 years old. Um, yeah, I was very into music and film and stuff at a young age. So yeah, I was really taken by New York City, and definitely I felt more like a fish out of water in the country. And I wasn't into hunting or fishing like my classmates were. And this very much ties into the conversation that we're going to have, I think, about music and Jane's addiction. And
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, like, I was very much in a fantasy world of listening to bands, and I was very excited by the culture of New York City for sure.
Mm. Okay. So you're growing up in Maine, and so what is your exposure to music like being there? I don't even know what city in Maine you were in or what town you were in.
So when I was in elementary school, I was in Portland, Maine, which is a pretty thriving place. It's a small city of like
Yeah.
60 or 100,000 people, but for such a small place, there's an art school, there's a lot of music venues, there's a lot of restaurants. There's a lot going on. And like
Yeah.
I said, my mom, when we moved up there, my mom got into theater, so she had a lot of friends who were artistic people. So I would say from age from age 6 to 9, I was surrounded by a lot of cool, creative stuff. And inevitably that made an impact. And my mom, just being the person that she was, she would take us to see whatever films she wanted to see. So I was like literally 7 years old watching Fellini films and Truffaut films. And I remember my 8th birthday, she took us to see 2001: A Space Odyssey, which just completely blew my mind.
Yeah.
So I give a lot of credit to her on the film tip, just exposing me to some really adult shit at a young age, and
Mm.
sort of stoking that creative fire. Um, so Portland was cool. A lot of intelligent classmates and just artistic stuff in the air in those years. That was the 80s. So that was like 1982 to 1986 was the years that we were there. Um, we then spent a year in Kansas with my dad. And then we came back to Maine to live with my mom again. But at that point, she had moved up about 2 hours north out to the country. So now we're in the country in Maine, which is a completely different
Oh,
situation.
yeah, I bet.
Um, so that was my junior high. My junior high years was from like 87 to 1990, and those years were up in the woods,
Oh,
in this little town called Hope, Maine, and uh, that is where I really got deep, deep, deep into music. And I started playing drums and just got obsessed with albums like the one that we're going to talk about today.
hmm.
That was very much in that time period of 87 to 90. So I had this background of some exposure to some cool cultural stuff, having been in Portland, Maine, but then being out in the woods in those years, it was completely isolating. And that really ties in, I think, with why I got deep, so deeply immersed and so obsessed with these bands, like literally just listening to albums start to finish on my headphones on repeat every night. Um, and like I said, learning to play drums and, just really getting inspired by that stuff more so than the stuff that was directly in front of me, which was woods and, streams and trees and rivers and hunting and
Right.
fishing.
Yeah. Well, so how did you get turned on to music during those years, like being out in the sticks? I mean, like where was it even coming from?
I would say that, uh, so to take it back a little bit, I was just always so rocked by certain songs that I would hear. Yeah, just, that visceral response, like, oh my God. And that goes back to, stuff my dad would play in the house. He was into classical music. So certain dramatic, explosive classical music that he would play just absolutely rocked me as like a 4-year-old kid. And then in the elementary school years, I would say it was more like the synth pop of the 80s, like, Axel F, the song from Beverly Hills Cop, or bands like Aha and, Duran Duran, and like whatever the synthy explosive hits of those years. And I also had a cousin named Alicia who was a minor freestyle star in those years. She was like trying to be Madonna. And I never met her, but she was my cousin in New York. And my mom gave us her tape. I think it was 1985. So that was another cool little bit of inspiration, knowing I had this cousin who was an actual pop singer.
Right.
Um,
Oh yeah, it's wild.
so, and then hair metal, I would say, especially in the year that we went to Kansas, which was that year in between Portland, Maine, and then living in the country in Maine and Hope, Maine. We did a year in Kansas, and like everybody in that town was obsessed with hair metal. It was like Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, Rat, all the bands of that day.
Yeah.
And I started that school year hating that stuff and being really defiant and saying, no, this is music for stupid people. I don't like this. But by the end of that year, I loved it. I was like a Motley Crue fan. And so I definitely flipped on that. So I would say the, that the music of the mid 80s definitely made an impact on me, but it was not yet like a deep connection. I think that deep connection came more so in the years out in the woods in Maine, 87 to 90.
Right.
And it was just a combination, I guess, of like getting a little older, also starting to play drums and getting to be a sort of a more serious person and getting into more serious music. So I would say like after that pop and hair metal stuff, after that phase, I think, if I can remember correctly, I think the first band I really got obsessed with was Pink Floyd. And the Pink Floyd was a big one in terms of that next phase of like being a music fan and sort of evolving into a more serious music fan. I don't know if we're ready to talk about Jane's Addiction, but it all kind of leads there. It all
Right,
kind
right.
of leads there.
Well, well then how did you find this record?
Jane's Addiction comes about in 1989. My sister gave me Nothing's Shocking on tape for my 12th birthday, June 89. Basically, she's 3 years older and she was in high school. So like I'm out in the woods in Maine. There's literally 10 people in my class.
Okay.
And she lives there with me. She's my sister, but she's going to high school in the bigger town that's 10 miles away. Basically, she's 3 years older than me, and she's got these friends who are 3 years older than her. She's getting music recommendations from them, and she's bringing that stuff home to me. So it's very secondhand. Jane's Addiction is one of those bands, and like it was very exciting. Like I'm tongue tied because there's so much to say about this album and my connection to it. And honestly,
Right.
it's been my favorite album since then, since I was 12 years old,
Wow.
and nothing has ever topped it. It's still my number one album. If anyone ever asks me, I'm like, yeah, that's my favorite album. So now we're
Yeah.
like 35 years later or whatever
Right.
it is.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So now you're coming from a class that had like 10 kids in it, right? So were there any other freak kids that were like listening to weird music or like kind of like obscure, like, whatever you want to call it, punk or metal or anything like that?
Yeah. So there was one kid who was that person, and his name was Sky Hall. Props to Sky. Um, a great person and still a friend, although I don't see him much anymore. But he was that person who kind of shared my interests in things.
Hmm.
So I would say he also got into Jane's Addiction sort of in a separate parallel way. We both liked it, but it wasn't really through each other. I discovered it through my sister and her older friends, who, it's just funny. Like, these kids, they seemed like very godlike, because here I was, I guess, in seventh grade, and they would have been probably seniors in high school at that point, like friends with my sister, showing her new music. And it's funny, they're very influential on me without ever having met them. And
Oh yeah.
so she gave me this tape, 12th birthday, 1989. And I mean, basically, it just tied together, it just connected so many things that I already liked. It had some of the psychedelic aspects of Pink Floyd. It had the explosiveness of Metallica, certainly of Guns N' Roses, another band I was listening to. I had Appetite for Destruction, and
Oh yeah.
just the explosiveness of that Guns N' Roses album, and like the banshee quality of Axl's voice. That was very exciting to me. Like, that music just transmitted a sense of danger to me that was very, very exciting. However, I felt like maybe it wasn't very intelligent music, Guns N' Roses.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it kind of teeters a line.
I think
See,
I think at this age, I see it as maybe more profound at this age. But at that age, I thought, well, this is exciting, dangerous shit. I love this, but I also feel like it's not smart enough. Um,
right.
but Jane's Addiction just tied it all together. It was like the danger of Guns N' Roses or Metallica, the energy of those bands with the psychedelic vibe of Pink Floyd. A lot of things that I liked, and even Bono, U2. It was sort of like a more extreme version of Bono's voice. Maybe there were all these reference points I had that connected within this one band, Jane's Addiction.
Hmm.
So yeah, just like instantly, I was hooked.
That's
And
wild.
there's so much theater with that band as well, visually, and in terms of just the way they made that album. Like, it wasn't just song, song, song. There was a sense of theater. There was a sense of cinema with um, with the whole presentation, the way that album was laid out from start to finish, and of course with the visual aspect of the band being so flamboyant and sort of
Right.
glamorous and trashy all at once.
Right.
Um, I think all of that just made so much sense to me. It all just clicked. It was like everything that was exciting to me all of a sudden was in one place.
Yeah, it's so wild. I mean, I never got into this band to be completely honest with you. Like when I was I think you have a few years on me. So when I was young, probably around that age of like 12 or something, maybe 10, Ritual de la Habitual came out. And I remember buying that on CD, and I had to get the fucking censored version with just the black text on it. And that record was good, like good, I mean, like they had the MTV presence with Been Caught Stealing, and that kind of grabbed me. I was into the funk punk thing, like I was a big fan of the Chili Peppers. So, they were definitely appealing in that regard because I knew they were kind of connected to that world. But I never listened to Nothing Shocking. And I kind of gave up on them at that point. Like, as I listened to the record a few times, I was just like, it's all right. It's got those like two songs I really like. It's got Stop and Been Caught Stealing. And that's kind of it. I wasn't into the very cerebral music at that time. I wasn't into like these long jams, which like, that record had a few of them, like, like 3 days or something was, probably the big anthemic one. Right. And so then I never went back. I never like looked into Nothing Shocking and nothing after that either. I mean, I know they broke up soon after, but they reunited and all that stuff. Um, so it was interesting to kind of dig into this record because now I'm listening to it for the first time in its entirety, and I can actually really appreciate a lot about it now at this point in my life. Like, I don't know if I was a little kid again, like a little teenager, if I would dig it. I probably would have just pushed it aside and just been like, I don't know, man, it's too weird. It's like it's got too much stuff going on and it's like not kind of anywhere down any line specifically, Like all the things that you liked about it, I think, are the things that would have turned me off about it when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's so personal. I think, the favorite album thing, it's so much to do with who you are, where you come from, and exactly what age you were when the thing first crossed your path.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this is one of those things that lined up in such a way that it just clicked so hard with who I was at that time. And but I will say it has stood the test of time. I mean, maybe part of that is that it rocked me so hard at that age that I can't even see it clearly. I don't even know if I'm viewing it objectively or if I'm just still rocked because I was rocked so hard at age 12. But I do think it does still appeal to me very much. I think for me, it stands the test of time.
I think it does. I mean, like looking at it as like a newbie for the most part. I mean, like, yeah, I think it's an amazing record. I think that it actually is absolutely a classic. It absolutely holds up time wise. Like there's nothing about this that kind of like says this is an 80s record, you know? Now, and also they were kind of like underground. Like even this record wasn't all that successful at the time. So did you have any sense of like underground music scene or anything like that?
No, that's a really good point. Again, being out in Hope, Maine, I had no connection to the underground, and this being, 1989 when I heard it, I didn't have access to underground things. My source of new music was very much Rolling Stone magazine. Within the bounds of Rolling Stone, I understood, well, Madonna is big time. That's mainstream.
Right.
And some of the lesser known bands that Rolling Stone is covering, that is what I thought was the underground. So that was like Jane's Addiction, Pixies, Sonic Youth, Metallica. I mean, it's a huge band, but to me, it was sort of underground because that was my context.
Well, at the time too, I mean, like late 80s, beginning of the 90s, I mean, they weren't that big yet. I mean, were they playing in Portland, Maine by that point?
It's funny that Metallica did play in Portland, Maine. In I think 88 or 89 when I was first into And Justice for All, and I was pretty damn obsessed with that album. Like,
oh yeah, they were pretty big with that album. Yeah,
and they played the Grammys. I remember they played one at the Grammys, and I remember watching that from home. But still, to me, this was an underground band that was maybe getting some mainstream attention, but in my context being what it was, I knew nothing about anything smaller than that. So
right. Well, so what were shows like for you? Did you go to any shows at this time of your life?
No, nope. I was still 12. No, I didn't go to any shows, but let me think.
So what's the first show you went to?
I did see Jane's Addiction finally in 1991, which it's only 2 years later, but it seemed like an eternity.
A lifetime, yeah.
By the time I saw Jane's Addiction, I was like, this has been my favorite band for as long as I can remember. So I saw them in the spring of 91 at the Cumberland County Civic Center in Portland, Maine. The British band Lush opened for them.
Huh.
And this would have been the spring right before the first Lollapalooza.
Oh, okay.
And then they broke up later that year. So it was actually towards the end. Ritual had come out the previous summer. So it was no longer the Nothing Shocking vibe or the Nothing Shocking album cycle. It was the Ritual cycle.
Right.
Um, Still amazing, still
Yeah.
awesome. And that show really sticks with me because it's like such a historical moment in time. It's like it's still right before Nirvana was known widely, and it's before the first Lollapalooza. I think it's before that word alternative was really widely used.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it was still like college rock is still what they would call bands like Jane's Addiction or the Pixies.
Right.
Alternative, I think later that year became more of a word.
Mm.
Um,
The catchphrase to define these bands that were kind of coming up.
yeah, and like that concert is so memorable because I saw before my own eyes it brought together all these different types of people. Like there were full on skinheads, there were full on goths, there were hippie types. And me, I was 13. I had no style. I was like,
Right.
just whatever, like jeans and a shirt and like some kind of jacket, like no style.
Right.
Um, it was cool because it brought together all these different groups under one roof, and that connecting of those groups under one roof, that became a thing that became branded, I think, as alternative.
Mm.
But this moment in time, it wasn't quite yet crystallized. So it's sort of an exciting moment in history, I think, because it's like when
Yeah.
that was about to happen, but it hadn't yet been so defined.
Right, right. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, like that's kind of what I figured out as I was kind of like doing the research about Jane's Addiction is that like, I didn't realize that they preceded Nirvana. Like for me, like I said, you got a couple years on me, so Nirvana was the big thing for me. And so, I kind of I guess Ritual came out just before Nirvana broke. So I mean, I probably got that record and wasn't, totally thrilled with it. And then Nirvana came out, I was just like, oh, this is my band. This is what
Yeah,
what I want to do or what I want to listen to. And so, it's so weird to think about it now and to look at it historically speaking. And like you're right. I mean, like it must have been a fucking insane scene. Like I know that I from what I read, that's what Jane's was all about. They did bring people together everywhere they went. It was just because it just had a little bit of everything, and so like it just turned random people on that were categorized in one genre for whatever whether it's the goths, the deadheads, the whatever it was, they could buy into this.
totally.
So yeah, pretty wild.
Totally. And yeah, and then Perry with Lollapalooza really made a whole thing out of that very concept that you just described. It's like
Right.
Jane's Addiction did it, I think, organically as a band, just the sound that they made, the vibe, it naturally brought these people together. And then I think Perry took that idea and ran with it, very consciously trying to bring different types of people together with Lollapalooza,
Right.
uh, which was a very cool thing.
Right. Now, so considering you were I'm imagining drums was your first instrument,
I played
right?
trombone in the fifth grade. Um, that was the year we were in Kansas, and then we got back to Maine. And part of moving around a lot as a little kid was, there's a lot of negatives of moving around as a kid, but a positive was that it was a chance to reinvent yourself. And I remember like really consciously deciding I wanted to be cool after this year in Kansas playing trombone. I was like, fuck this. I want to
Right.
be cool when we go back to Maine. So I had some vision of like what that meant. And I remember telling kids in the sixth grade, like first week of school, I told everybody that my name was Spike. Uh, I don't know where I came up with that, but I gave
Yeah.
myself this nickname and it did not stick. I think it lasted like 1 week, but,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I decided, I wanted to play drums, I guess 87, 88, probably early 1988, I think.
Right.
Yeah, actually, I think that that's another factor in like why this band rocked me so much is like my drum teacher was actually into funk music. And I haven't thought much about this, but I think this is probably a factor. Like you're saying how Nirvana rocked you. One of my one of the reasons Nirvana didn't rock me as much is that those drums to me sounded very straightforward. And I think my ear was more attuned to these funk rhythms because of
Sure.
who my drum teacher was and the stuff he was turning me on to as a musician. And with with what's his name, with Steve Perkins from Jane's Addiction, he's so influenced by those rhythms and brings a lot of that style into Jane's Addiction. So I think
Right.
that was something that also really appealed to me about them.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna ask because I mean I love drums. I really do. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to do them now myself. So any pointers you have for me, by all means.
Hell
But
yeah.
so did you try to emulate Stephen Perkins when you were young? Like, if this record was such a big turn on for you, did you try to play along and can you play these drums?
Yeah. So the first band that I played in that really played shows and did stuff, that started in 91. So later that year, probably the fall of 91, that same year that I got to see them live. And we did our thing from like then through maybe the following year. And yeah, we did a lot of Jane's Addiction covers. We played Stop, we played 3 Days, um, probably Mountain Song.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, I was definitely inspired by Steve Perkins back then. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you could do it. I mean, like, 'cause he's pretty complicated drummer. I feel like he definitely is kind of an all over the kit kind of player.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Well,
people
I
describe it
wouldn't.
as primal. I don't know if I would call it primal, but it's definitely kind of advanced.
Well, I don't pretend to be able to play like him. He's his own dude, but
Oh, sure.
I definitely tried, and I thought his style was really cool for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. We should probably go ahead and try to get into this record a little bit. I was curious, I know that you kind of know what I do here, and I was just like, I was wondering if you looked at this album and you were like, I wonder what he's going to ask me.
I'm excited. Like I said, I think I've been waiting to do this interview since 1989. This is like the most exciting thing that I could possibly talk about. So
Oh man, that's
I'm a blank slate and an open book, and just I'm
okay.
ready to rock.
Good, good. Well, that's good. I try not to get too personal, but there might be one in here that's a little maybe might dig a little deep. Um, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes because if anything, I can always share with you, and like, if it helps you out, because there's so much to this record. Well, there's so much and there's so little. So I mean, what I realized about it is that the lyrics specifically are pretty like what's the word for it? No, I don't want to say psychological exactly, but they're deep lyrics. Perry definitely kind of pulls at like, psychological things, a lot of like, kind of existential things, I guess he had always kind of I guess he was quoted as saying like, he's read everything, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, like he's kind of like like dabbled in all of these kind of religions and spirituality in general, and so it kind of shows in the music, like he definitely kind of like lets it all out there and kind of puts it all out there as far as this like questioning life and existentialism, I guess you could say, right? Was that something that turned you on? Because I mean, obviously, you seem to think like Nirvana was kind of like more straightforward and not, or you were saying Guns N' Roses was kind of like the dumbed down version of like heavy metal. Like, did you were you paying attention to what this music was saying?
I think that first and foremost, it was the visceral feeling I got from the sound and just the complete package, just the whole onslaught. And I wasn't seeking lyrics or seeking guidance in lyrics or anything, but um, so lyrics were not first and foremost for me. But, listening to this album night after night after night, of course, lyrics would hit me and would stick with me. And one of my favorites, just going off what you said, the song Ocean Size. I've seen the ocean break on the shore, come together with no harm done. He's talking about how he wants to be more like the ocean.
Right.
So instead of breaking, he wants to be something that doesn't break, like the ocean.
Right. Something that powerful too. I mean, like, you don't think of water necessarily as like a powerful force, but like when you see it in the ocean doing its thing and how it can kind of create a massive swell, especially coming from a surfer like Perry, you want those waves, you want those big ass waves. And when one of those things hits you, you're like completely humbled. You're like, oh yeah, the ocean is nothing to fuck with.
Oh, absolutely. And he has a respect for the earth. He is a surfer, right? And he has respect for the earth and nature. And growing up in rural Maine, you're in touch with nature. And there are a lot of hippies from Maine, and there's a reason for it. They're attracted to that place, or that place makes them that way. A respect for nature. And I realized that I didn't know how much I had that, but I realized that at this age, living in New York City for so many decades. But the years in Maine definitely implanted that environmentalism of some kind in me. And that's neat. That's definitely, that runs through his stuff too. Just that respect for the awesome power of nature.
Yeah, absolutely. And specifically, water and the ocean. I mean, like, he's obviously been very, very vocal about his conservation to, protect the water. Being a surfer, it's kind of all you care about. All right. Well, let me see. So before I get into the album, I have a quote here from Dave Jordan, the producer of the album. So he says, during the making of Nothing Shocking, Bob Ezrin came by. Bob Ezrin, also another famous producer, did a lot of
and he worked with Pink Floyd, didn't he? Bob Ezrin?
Yes. Yep, he did. Yep. And so he said, don't try to make a record people will like. Try to make a record people will hate, because then you're not in the middle. If you make a middle of the road record, you're nowhere. But if you make a record that, let's say, 50% of people vehemently hate, there's going to be 50% of people who absolutely love it. So with this being said, which side may you have catered to on your new album? Like, did you make a record that you wanted people to hate, or did you want people to love?
Are you asking me about me and Body Stuff?
Correct. Yeah, Body Stuff's new. Yeah, Body Stuff's new record.
Oh shit. Okay, switching gears. You're asking if I made an album I thought people would like, or yeah, honestly, I don't think at all about other people when I make the Body Stuff music. It's very, very much from the heart, from the gut. It's very real to me. It's very genuine to sounds that I want to make and lyrics that I want to say. And I think once the songs are done, maybe there's a little reflection, like, oh, I wonder how that one's going to hit someone else. But
right.
It is so internal, so personal, so from the gut, from the heart. It's like I really, really shut off that critical mind that has that awareness of like, oh, someone might hear it like this, somebody might hear it like that.
Yeah. Oh, weird. No, that's a weird kind of perspective. I mean, actually, no, it's not weird, but it's just kind of an interesting perspective to have, because you are so interconnected to the music business and the industry that, like, someone would probably assume, like, oh, you're that's the only thing you're going to think about, is this, like, how do I make this connect with somebody?
Yeah, totally. I think that it's very much it's a balance to my day job. So if people out there don't know, I am a publicist for other people's bands by day. So I am very in tune with trying to sell a thing, trying to persuade, trying to,
and what's happening.
And yeah, right, in tune with like what a thing sounds like and how people might perceive it, and trying to get people to pay attention to things. That is what I do by day. But like, yeah, I guess body stuff is an absolute counterbalance to that. Like, I shut off that part of myself completely and just try and make something that's very very genuine.
Hmm.
It's, I mean, not, I don't want to sound conceited or something. That's not at all where I'm coming from, but it just feels very necessary to make this music. It's like an absolutely necessary creative expression.
Right. Right.
And I'm 45. It's like, let's go, we
Yeah.
gotta do things while we're still on Earth. And
Yeah. Well, we have the ability. Let's do it.
yeah.
No, I hear you, man. I just recently started getting back into it. And like I said, I'm trying to play drums. So it's like I've never even played drums before. I mean, at least not as far as performing or anything. So it's a completely different skill set. It's just like, I mean, you took lessons, obviously, but I mean, like now you've changed it up.
I took lessons in the very early years. So the first 3 years of playing drums, I took lessons, and then I was in high school, and I did not take lessons anymore, but I was in all the school bands, like
okay,
orchestra and jazz band, and so there was a lot of teaching through that. And then from then on, I just was on my own playing in bands.
Right.
I do not play drums anymore. I put it down 10 years ago.
Right. So that's like, this is another thing where now you're a songwriter primarily, right? And a vocalist.
Exactly. Yeah. So like you switching to drums, it's like a parallel of me switching to vocals and songwriting.
Yeah. But so what like, how do you do that? Because you're not trained on any other instrument, correct?
Correct. Not trained on any other instruments. Let's see. Well, I was a drummer from age 10 up until about 35, and I kind of hit the ceiling or something. How do I say it? I got to join Today's the Day, which was one of my favorite bands. Right. From the time I was 18, this was one of my favorite bands, and life is crazy, and through a turn of events, twist of fate, I got to join that band in about 2010, and I played in that band from 2010 to 2013, and got to make an album and tour the world, and very, very cool stuff. But I just kind of like reached that point where I wanted to do something different, and I felt like I had done a lot with the drums, and I was ready to try something else. So just getting a little burnt out on all of it. And so I left that band in 2013, and that coincided with this new idea to start singing and writing songs. So yeah, like the songwriting with Body Stuff is based on just being a lifelong music fan, and melodies come to me, and I figure out what they are on piano, and it's just as simple as that. It's just creating songs based on what I think sounds good. But I do think the background in drumming is very helpful, because I understand rhythms, I understand how songs are organized. I think that's a good, strong foundation, being first.
For sure. I mean, it's the backbone, really. So I mean, you have that understanding. So that's kind of the structure to start with, So yeah. Well, that's cool. All right. Well, I'm going to talk to you more about Body Stuff and your new record through the topic of Jane's Addictions, Nothing Shocking. So we start off the album with the first song, Up the Beach. Now, this is an instrumental song, so there's not really much I can say about it. I mean, it's a great intro. It's kind of, it really kind of cleans the palette, if you will, to what to expect for the record, to kind of like, it's a good intro.
It's an amazing intro. I mean, it's one of my favorite songs on the album. I think it's it's so intense, it's so epic. And that word cinematic, I think it's used a lot in different ways, but I think that word really applies here. It's like that is the intro to the movie. It puts you there. I feel as if I am on the beach, whatever beach that is. Just such an exciting way to start that album.
Right, right. But without the words, which is interesting because it's just like, I think the words are such an important part to this record as well. Not enough for 75% of the publishing rights, but important.
That's a reference to Perry asking for
oh my God,
75%.
I couldn't believe it, man. I read that. I was just like, fuck this guy. I was just like I said, I've never been a huge fan of Jane's Addiction, but I've always had respect for him. And like Perry especially seemed like a cool guy, seemed like someone that I was just like, I think we could get along, but then I read this and I was just like, what the fuck is this guy's problem? Like, you can't do that to your band like that. And obviously that's what drove the wedge and kind of motivated the ultimate split up,
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's rough, man.
Yeah. I remember hearing about that too and feeling a little disappointed. I will say I never looked to my rock star idols for, lessons in how to live life. So I'm usually not super bummed. Like, there's a lot of bad behavior, and
you're not surprised by some of this like shrill kind of like shit that happens.
Yeah. Like, I think the art is the art, and I love it in isolation for what it is. That Jane's Addiction or any of these other bands, like.
Sure.
Anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get it. I mean, I can probably agree with that. All right, so then the next song being Ocean Size. I kind of have a big long thing here. So let me see if I can get through this. All right, so I got a quote from Dave Navarro speaking about this song, and he says that Perry was a big influence on his guitar playing. Quote from Loudwire magazine says, he was sitting right next to me, and I was playing a bunch of stuff, and it was sounding good, but it was sounding rock and roll. It was sounding like a guitar player playing a solo. And he looked at me, and I remember specifically, I'm not going to say her name, but there was a girl I had a really tumultuous relationship with. Let's call her Stacy for the sake of the story. He looked at me and said, do it one more time and think of Stacy. And I was like, fuck that girl. He's like, think of Stacy, think of Stacy. Then I played thinking of that girl. He taught me how to take my anger and put it into my playing. So that's kind of what I mean when I say the dissonant notes and the out of tune stuff and the raunchy, not perfect, just in the moment type of playing. I attribute a lot of that to him.
Wow. That's very cool. I never heard that before.
Yeah. I try to dig deep, man. So what or who do you attribute some of your performance on your new record?
That's a cool question. Okay, so like, who is my Stacy? That's what you're asking.
Yeah, who or what? Because I mean, it could be different. Obviously, I mean, your process is different, and you only have one partner in body stuff. Who is your partner again?
The partner is Ryan Jones,
okay.
and he was also in Today's the Day with me, and he was also in a previous band called Wet Nurse with me, and then even before that, we knew each other because I was booking shows at a venue here in New York City. I had a weekly party every Monday night. So I was booking shows every single Monday, and Ryan was my sound guy for those shows. That's how we initially hooked up. So,
okay.
I'll say quickly, like in the body stuff thing, I am the songwriter 100%. He is the technical guy who very much helps me execute, so I have the songs written, I take them to him, and together we record them. But the way it winds up sounding, sonically, it's very much him because he's an awesome audio engineer. So
yeah, okay.
And then he plays live with me. He plays guitar when we play live. The question was not that. It was,
well, like who or what could you attribute some of your performance on your new record?
Okay, so the question is not so much what is inspiring the lyrics. It's more like what is inspiring the vibe of
Yeah, it's a general question. I mean, you can kind of take it how you like it. I mean, if there's something that sticks out to you about like a take that you did in the performance aspect of the record, like, that kind of stuck out to you being like, holy shit, that was a pretty amazing take, and like something that kind of inspired you in that moment.
I love that question. I wish I had prepared for that because there's probably stuff there to talk about, and I'll probably draw a blank at this moment. But yeah, shoot. I will say, like, regarding Dave being inspired by an ex-girlfriend that he hated or whatever, um, it's funny, like with body stuff, I am much more thinking about love
Hmm.
when I'm writing this stuff and when I'm performing it. Um, Not so much romantic love, but more like just the universal love of connections between people, and
Okay.
just gratitude for being on Earth for the short time that we are. Like all the songwriting, it's more like just being inspired, and whatever comes out comes out.
Right, right. Well,
But
so what inspires you? Like what is it that inspires you to make your music?
well, there was an initial sort of mission statement, I will say, and it was to put out something positive, to put out something based in love, and this I think comes out of being immersed in metal for a long time and really loving it. I think being immersed in metal for a long time, I really wanted to put out something that was the opposite of that, and something that was fueled by these very real feelings I was having at that time, which is this is like age 35 when I was just starting the Body Stuff project.
Hmm.
Um, it's maybe for the first time. Maybe these are feelings that hadn't really crystallized until this point, but I think yeah, a sense of connectedness and general love for life, and those sorts of things. I wanted to express that, and
Hmm.
that's about as much of a mission statement as there has been for this project. Beyond that, and there's no rules. I mean, I could write a very pissed off song if that's what comes out, that's fine. But
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean,
yeah,
like it's not like the music is kind of like introverted singer-songwriter stuff. I mean, it's still got a very heavy, metal edge to it. It's actually got a little bit of electronic feel to it because you got the like that drum machine in place of acoustic drums, right? And
yes,
it's just like it's very much like Ministry, kind of like that's kind of what it reminds me of, right?
cool. I would agree that the program drums probably gives it that vibe, and that growly, distorted bass that we use a lot of times.
Right.
People compared it to, there's been Godflesh comparisons or Killing Joke comparisons. I think
Hmm.
that might come from just the sound of that rhythm section, and some of
Right.
those chunky guitars. I mean, I love, love, love those thick guitars, which, it's probably from listening to And Justice for All on repeat when I was 11,
Yeah.
and that's never left me. I mean, I love that thick, brutal, ignorant, chugging guitar. Like I can't get enough of it. Mortician, like whatever.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite stuff. So there's a little bit of that going on for sure. But in terms of the songwriting and the vocal, it's much more. I don't know. I'm imagining myself maybe something more in the realm of like the late 80s rock frontmen, before Jane's Addiction even, but when I was even younger. And I already mentioned there was like the synth pop of the 80s, the hair metal, and in the mix there was also like all this hard rock of the late 80s, like U2, Joshua Tree, or Billy Idol, Moni Moni,
Hmm.
um, Brian Adams, all these like sort of world weary frontmen who are of that hard rock vibe.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I think there's something there in what I'm doing. I'm probably reaching back in time, but again, it's not really consciously like. I'm certainly not consciously trying to do some kind of retro act. Not at all. I'm just letting these songs come out, and they come out how they do. But I'm just trying, in this moment, I'm trying to trace back, like, where exactly is this stuff coming from? And I think there is something about that late '80s, the top 40 radio, like the hard rock that was on the top 40 radio. I think that's a reference point.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I mean, it's great music. I mean, it's like I said, I feel like it has a similarity to like Ministry or something like that. It's got this a little bit of electronic feel to it because of the programmed drums, but it can be relentless at times too, just like a kind of like a hardcore or a metal band, you know. So it's not just like, flowery and all that stuff, if you're saying you're kind of connecting it to love, it's just not to be confused.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think like lyrically, there's maybe two things going on. If I could generalize, and again, there's no rules, so it could go in any direction. But like looking at what I've done so far, I think some of the songs are quite nostalgic and sort of like trying to make sense of the past. And then others are more of the here and now and looking forward and just trying to put forth some kind of worldview of what this all is. And it tends to land in this space of love and optimism that I mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I like that. I like that a lot, actually. All right. Well, let's keep on moving. So next song is Had a Dad. So as you might, consider with the name Had a Dad, there could be a lot of kind of connections here between your paternal relationships. You have a dad, and is he still in Kansas?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, this one spoke to me. Like I said, they split up when I was 5 years old. My mom and my sister and I moved to Maine.
Right.
My
So
dad
you
moved
kind
to
of
Kansas.
had a like disenfranchised relationship with your dad, who kind of came to heads at times, I imagine.
Just that we didn't see him much. We would see him once a year.
Right.
So he was absent because of this situation. We just lived in different places. Everybody was broke. There was no money. So we had the money to fly out there once a year. So that was tough. And this song, I read recently that it was about, what did I read? I forget. It's about Eric Avery.
Yeah, so Eric Avery actually is kind of he wrote the majority of the song, and then he was the inspiration lyrically. He didn't write the lyrics, but he gave the idea to Perry to kind of go off with, because Eric was one of those youths that had realized late in his life that who he thought was his father, his biological father, was actually a stepfather.
Right.
So
right. I just read that. Yeah. I didn't know that until probably last week when I was listening to this album in preparation for this interview, and I read a pretty great article. Shoot, where was that? It was Pitchfork. Yeah, it was like
okay.
It was a Pitchfork review of Nothing Shocking, but like from last year. It was a pretty recent review I had never seen, and I think I learned that fact about Had a Dad in that review. But even without knowing specifically what the song was about, just the vibe is there in the lyrics. Like, I had a dad, he's not here anymore.
And, right. And it can hit with a kid, especially because, like you, with coming from a separated parents, that certainly hits. And obviously there's plenty of kids out there that kind of had that same background growing up,
Definitely.
Or kids who had dads that just totally skipped out, I mean, that's a total probability too. But then there's also the existential direction of the lyrics that can be interpreted as kind of like this nihilistic approach, So like there's even like there's quotes in the songs and the lyrics being like, God is dad and God is dead.
Right.
So it's there's a deeper meaning there, possibly, and obviously, depending on who you are as a listener, it can affect you in either way.
Yeah.
So I mean, so you have a dad and you have a decent relationship with him?
Yes. Yes, I do. It's just that he wasn't here, right? So we lived so far apart, so I didn't see him very much. So yeah, I think that experience of divorce and that separation, that felt like a big loss as a kid, you know.
Yeah, because he wasn't there for all the landmarks, all the the things that you kind of want your parent there for, you know.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
so do you have a God?
I was raised without religion. My mom is Jewish. My dad was raised Catholic. Um, both of them are highly intelligent, I would say spiritual people in their own very, very personal ways. Like they have their own, I think that they find their own answers for the most part. But in terms of, organized religion, I did not have any of that growing up. So the word God was always very foreign to me. It held no meaning. It held no weight.
Yeah. Huh.
As an older person, finding my own way in life, now I can sort of find a meaning for that word. I think it always felt like that word belonged to someone else because I just didn't have that background in church or
Right.
um, it just always felt like someone else's word. But at this age, I feel like I can use that word because I'm old enough now and
Yeah.
I can assign my own meaning to that word. But
Right.
yeah,
So what I mean, what is your kind of meaning for it, do you think, at this point?
I think that consequence is very real. Cause and effect is very real.
Hmm.
So there is this order to the universe, at least our dimension of the universe as people. There is a system in place. I think the system itself you could call God if you wanted to, and it doesn't mean a paternal force or a force above,
Right.
but the system from within, the system itself seems pretty godlike to me.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, like, based on how you were saying, you see body stuff, music as trying kind of like a connection to love and like that the eternal love, not the romantic love. Um, I can say that I can see that with a mutual understanding of this, like, there's a spirituality about things that maybe we don't understand, maybe we don't comprehend completely, but we understand that love is a very very real and connective force, and I think that that's kind of what makes the world go round when everything is going well. When things are hitting the fan and being like really shitty, obviously that's another type of force, which is probably more along the lines of like hate and confusion. So yeah, I think you seem like a spiritual dude.
um, well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like Perry Farrell. I mean, like I don't know what his background is, but obviously, he 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 appreciates the greater aspect of life and the world and how it might work and how spirituality plays into that somehow. Whatever it is, I mean, we don't know.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think that I've always liked to find my own answers, find my own way of doing things. And as a result, I'm not very well read. Um, I think a lot of the a lot of the ideas that I come up with they're probably all already written down. Like, oh, this one's Buddhism, this one's Taoism. Like, yeah, probably. I
Right.
have I don't know. I think there's a purity in sort of like finding your own answers and then going back and reading
Right.
up and seeing what
Sure.
other people said and seeing where you connect and where you don't connect. So.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah. It's trying not to cloud your judgment, like if you read or listen to something that is kind of like, telling you what is what, then if you decide that you believe in that, well, that's what it was that kind of informed your decision, as opposed to just kind of thinking it up yourself.
Exactly.
Right, right.
Yeah.
No, I'm the same way, man. Exactly. All right, well, let's keep on moving. Ted just admitted. So this is a weird one. Great song,
Yeah.
very dark.
Yeah.
Apparently, this song is very closely connected to Ted Bundy and some of his interviews while on trial for his murders. So it's pretty dark. Um, this is going to be a little bit of a weird question. So there's a lot of dark ways I could take this, considering the content of this song. But so instead, I'll ask you this: the name "Body Stuff," based on the most compelling part of the lyrics of this song, is Body Stuff more sex or more violent? Would you say?
Are we asking about the band name
The
or
name,
about?
the name, yeah, not necessarily the context or like because obviously we know that that it really in reality it's all about love.
Yeah, yeah. No, great. Yeah, it's very much just like a empty vessel that you can put your own meaning in. I wanted a name that was universal, and what is more universal to us humans than body? And then that word stuff is almost comically broad and vague, and it's a silly word, stuff.
Mm.
I liked the idea of an absolutely broad, vague word that you could put your own or name that you could put your own meaning in, and the humor of like taking a silly word like stuff and elevating it to this high level, like putting the word stuff on a pedestal or in bright lights. I thought that was funny. But it's not meant to be funny. It's really meant to be serious, I guess.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, it could be right. It could be so many things. It could be sex. It could be the physical body. It could be, entrails and guts. Um,
Right.
but then there is a meaning that I like, which is tied in more with my initial impulse to like, put out something very genuine, something loving, just like body stuff, meaning like something from the gut,
Oh,
something very real,
right.
something. I think I don't really quite have it articulated, but there's something to that, like something about the realness of what I'm doing. I think that connects to that name.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I get it. I mean, it comes from the body. I mean, like whichever way you want to think about it, it's coming from your mind. That's part of your body. Coming from your heart, it's part of your body as well.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. Well, I'm glad that that's the way that played out. I was a little worried. Because yeah, some of this content is little strange, like the next song, "Standing in the Shower Thinking." Another great song. I mean, I really love it. I really do like this whole album. I really have a new profound respect for it. um, so I know there's tons of stuff I can pull apart from this song, but very simply, I'll just ask you, where do you do your best thinking?
Absolutely. In the shower. And in the shower is one of the places. And then also just walking around, I would say, like walking around the city, uh, just point A to point B, maybe walk. I live near the Williamsburg Bridge, so
Hmm.
there's many occasions where I'll walk from here to Manhattan or back. And yeah, walking around, a lot of the first body stuff concepts, melodies, lyrics, um, a lot of that stuff came to me while walking around the city. Absolutely. It's a very New
Uh-huh.
York City project because this is where I live. This is where I've lived since the late '90s. So inevitably, my experiences are here, or most of my adult experiences are here in the city, um, and the songs were largely conceived literally on the streets, walking around. But the shower too, like both of those are, it's sort of the same. It's like a meditative state where you're by yourself and able to
Right.
let the mind wander.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, some of the best thoughts, right, happen in your alone private time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, all right. So let's move on to the next song, "Summertime Rolls." So now this is one of those songs that I had a kind of questionable interpretation of it, because it's a great song, but from even all of the stuff that I've read about it, it's essentially a love song. It's essentially like a romantic love song, you know. Um, so now, like I was saying before, I don't want to get too personal, but considering the theme of the song and the kind of the contents, like if you think about the song in your mind right now and kind of get that kind of sentimental feeling of like young, crazy, romantic summertime love, because that's kind of what it was. I mean, like in reality, Perry Farrell and his girlfriend at the time, this oh shit, what was her name?
Casey.
Casey. Yeah. Right, right. Um, you can imagine how just blissful that was, because I have a similar experience actually. But um so I'll ask you this, and if it's not something that you're not comfortable with, then we'll just skip it. But seeing as how the song essentially feels like an ode to a magical summer romance, I mean, have you had an experience like that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when I first heard this album, I hadn't even kissed a girl yet. I was like
Right. Too young, yeah.
probably 2 years away from kissing a girl at that point. But even still, it evoked such visions and fantasies of what that might be like. I mean, it just talk about cinematic. Like that song really puts you in that zone of that summer bliss, that timeless summer afternoon bliss,
Right.
which is a state I love, and it doesn't need to be connected to sex, but it's just that summertime freedom and abandon is such a powerful feeling. And again, growing up in Maine in the summer is really beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and you can literally roll around in fields in Maine, and or like, well, there's not much in the way of beaches. They're pretty rocky beaches, but if you're lucky enough to have a boat, you can float around in a boat
Right.
on a
Yeah.
summer afternoon. Like it's a very magical place, and that song connects, I think, to that stuff.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I was actually in Maine last summer
Mm.
with my family, just kind of
Where
hanging
did you
around.
go?
We were like kind of hit a couple of spots. Like we did the city. We stopped in New Hampshire first, then kind of made our way up to Portland. Did a couple just trolling around, hit a couple of museums, stuff like that. Did some record store shopping, and my son is interested in farms, so we hit a farm just outside of the city. Actually, I forget the name of it right now, but dairy farm, just kind of hanging out with some cows, milked some of the cows, got to feed them some grass, stuff like
Oh,
that.
that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it was nice, and so and then we hit a beach coming back down. Um, I think it was technically New Hampshire, I think, but it was somewhere around there. It was just like really, really long ass pier. Old Orchard. Does that sound
Oh yeah,
familiar?
yeah, yeah. Old Orchard is Maine. Yep.
That is
You
Maine.
got a
Okay, it's right on
boardwalk.
the line, right?
Yeah, Southern Maine.
Yeah. So we hit that, and there was like a carnival going on. So yeah, we just kind of made a night of it. Just hung out, before heading back to the hotel.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
good.
great. It was beautiful. We're all about water here. I love it.
Yeah,
I couldn't live somewhere that didn't have a beach.
yeah. I feel the same. I need to be next to the water. Like even if I'm not making use of it, I just want to be near it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's powerful. Not as powerful as Mountain. Mountain Song is next. All right, so there's a couple of things here, right? So there's like a couple of like really important parts in this song, I think. One thing I found was a quote from Perry Farrell about Mountain Song. He says that Mountain Song was actually about, I hate to say it, but drugs. Climbing this mountain and getting as high as you can, and then coming down that mountain, reveals Farrell. What it what it feels to descend from the mountaintop, not easy at all. The ascension is tough but exhilarating. Getting down it's a real bummer. Drugs is not for everybody, obviously. for me, I wanted to experience the heights and the lows coming along with it.
Wow. Yeah, I never knew. I never knew what he was singing about. I mean, he says pin eyes, which is to me a heroin reference, and
right.
It's not hard to imagine that he's singing about drugs, but I just never really thought it through. I didn't know what Mountain Song was about.
Right. Now, another weird aspect about this song that is also kind of quoting Perry Farrell directly. He says that Mountain Song, there's a part, cash in now, honey, cash in now, Miss Smith, and Miss Smith is his mother. So he says our last name was Smith. So cashing in when she cashed in on her life, because she actually committed suicide when he was like 3, I think. So she decided that to her at the time, she was desperate. Life wasn't worth it for her. That was her opinion. Some people think never take your life, and some people find that their life isn't worth living. She was in love with my dad, and my dad was not faithful to her, and it broke her heart. So she was very desperate, and she did something that I know she regrets. Pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, it's heavy. Yeah, I'd never heard that.
Yeah, I mean, so those are to the two parts. I mean, like, that's a very kind of specific part to that song, which is only, lyrically in the chorus. But it obviously is very profound to obviously lose a parent, especially in that way. So that kind of explains a little bit of the darkness about the band in general. Dave Navarro also having lost his mother to a murder. It's like these guys, they have a lot of trauma in their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't really have a question for that song. I mean, based on those two things, I mean, like there's no question there. Because actually, as far as drugs go, I didn't want to get into that until we got into Jane Says. So the song after is Idiot's Rule, which I wanted to skip. It's kind of a silly song. Like it's good, and it kind of caters to my youth as a punk funk obsessed kid. But nothing really there,
One thing I'll mention about that song is reading through the liner notes. Well, first off, when my sister gave me this album, it was a cassette tape that she had dubbed. So all I had was the blank tape with the album and her handwriting. So didn't have any other information beyond that, which I think adds to the mystique and the power of the album. But about 6 months later, I went to the record store and actually bought the cassette. So I had the real version. And of course, continued listening every night, reading through the liner notes. And I remember seeing that Flea and Angelo from Fishbone and Chris from Fishbone were musicians on Idiot's Rule. And that was really exciting to me because, again, pre-internet, my sources of information being pretty much Rolling Stone magazine, not much else. And to see that, okay, so the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Fishbone are friends with Jane's Addiction. They're connected.
Yeah.
And how exciting that was. Being 12 years old and just discovering that.
And you knew who Fishbone was and liked Fishbone.
I knew of them. Yeah. And the Chili Peppers also. I think it's just a bygone time, where information was so hard to come by, and these little scraps of information were so exciting. Like, oh my God, I just discovered there's a connection between Chili Peppers and Jane's Addiction. Like,
and
then the imagination runs wild. Like, I wonder what it's like to live in Hollywood.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I completely sympathize with that because I was the same. I lived pre-internet era. It was wild times. So next song, Jane Says. Now this is the standout track. This is the one everyone knows, obviously, but it's a beautiful song, but like if you really listen to it, it's incredibly depressing. because as we can probably all figure out, it's Jane being the inspiration for the band's name, Jane's Addiction. Jane was clearly an addict and had a very serious problem, and the lyrics just spell it out. It's just completely perfect depiction of what this woman's life was like, essentially. So I've never been close to anyone that was seriously involved in drugs. Have you?
Yes.
So does this song kind of speak to that kind of nature of those people and their relationship with drugs and their relationship with you?
I've known a lot of people involved in drugs, but listen to this song, I just take it to be a specific story. Perry's own story about living with his roommate Jane, or his friend, and her situation. I guess Sergio being the pimp, and um, so I'm not so much connecting that song to anything I've experienced, but yeah, like you said, it's a dark little snapshot of some people's lives for sure.
Right, right, yeah. I mean, hers specifically. I mean, as being being the focal point of it. Um, but I mean, like, see, because I don't know, like, I feel like being musicians, being involved in rock and roll, probably you more so than me. Uh, you may have seen it a lot just because musicians are notorious, drug and booze hounds. Like we can't control ourselves. Like a lot of people have problems or develop problems because you just kind of go along with the party, and then next thing you know, hey, this thing has kind of really grabbed a hold of me, and I've never had that relationship. Like I've known people that have had like heroin problems, but either I didn't know them at the time that they had the problem and they managed to kind of like pull themselves through it and now are kind of just like, your average normal person that's just, sober, let's just call it. Um, but to be in a relationship with a person, as a friend, even while they're going through that, and like, that they have a problem. I mean, like how difficult can that be?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. My experience with that drug is I was really excited by alcohol and drugs as a younger person, like
Sure, me too.
uh, like from age 13. Um, it appeared to be a positive thing to me
It was
in my understanding of things.
right.
Drugs and alcohol was an exciting thing,
Yeah,
and
it's glamorized by rock and roll. I mean, like, of
well,
course.
it's yeah, I guess it's glamorized by rock and roll, and I think that I was on a path of wanting to experience things,
Mm,
and I wanted to gain experience and just be in the world, and drugs and alcohol was part of that to me. It was part of gaining very necessary experience and like becoming like evolving as a person, and I guess just immersing yourself in something a little bit dangerous. That was very exciting to me, and I saw it as a good necessary thing. I didn't see it as a dark negative thing. I saw it as an exciting thing that I wanted to be
mm,
part of.
yeah.
And so, you know, I dabbled in things as a kid in Maine, but when I got to college, it's like a whole other level. Like all of a sudden, hard drugs were available
Right.
when I got to college, and I think it was a certain like cultural historical moment, being the mid '90s, where heroin was very popular and readily accessible, and like honestly, I can remember looking back on college days, if I was to make a list of people, I could tell you like at least 50 people who were on heroin who were classmates of mine.
Hmm.
So it wasn't a small thing. It was a big deal. There were a lot of people on heroin
Right.
when I was at school, and that is something that I also tried, and it was involved in to some extent in those years. So uh, not since then, like not since the 90s, but in the 90s, that is something I was involved in. So I guess like in terms of having a friend who's doing that, I guess anytime I had a friend doing that, I was also doing that. So
oh yeah. So you don't have any, you never had a relationship with anyone after that, as far as like, that you kind of had to deal with as a person that was clean.
right.
Right. Well, I
Right.
mean,
That's
that's
correct.
good, I guess. I mean, it's same as me. It's just like, I just don't experience that. I just don't have those people around me in my circles, I mean, it's just like I know that they are there. I know they exist. But yeah, I mean, and I dabbled too, but only like once, and that happened to be the only time I was hanging out with someone that had kind of a problem. They didn't seem problematic. Like they seemed just cool and like that they were having fun. I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, cool, let's do it. But but yeah, that person ended up actually having a kind of a bad problem, but they're cool now. They're good. They made it through it, got clean or at least got off that stuff and now we are existing.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. At this age, I look at that as a very destructive force. So
Yeah, no, I know. I mean,
as a
see, I
kid,
don't
I viewed it
understand it.
one way, but on this side of the hill, I view it very differently. And
Yeah.
I would never touch that. It's like you've probably seen Train Spotting, and there's some quote. It's the first quote in the film, I think, where he's like, you can choose life, you can choose all the things that a normal person would aspire to in life. The house, the car, the money,
Hmm.
all of that on one side, or you can choose heroin. That's the other, and that's accurate. I think it's like you sacrifice everything if you go
Right.
down. So
Yeah, I don't know, man. See, because that's the thing is like I have never personally experienced it, so I don't know. I mean, like I only see these things, and like from what I know of it, or at least in my own personal limited experience, I'm just like, well, fuck, man. I mean, like, how can you not get away from it? Like, how can you just not stop, like, and just be like, okay, look, this is fucking everything up. Like, I mean, it's the same thing with drinking. I mean, it's like I just took a few weeks break and I was just because I was just like, you know what? Let me make sure that this is not a problem. Let me make sure that I can stop doing this and it's not like hard for me to stop.
yeah,
And after 2 weeks, I was just like, yeah, you know what? I don't need one. I absolutely can tell myself, honestly, I don't need one. So I can start again and feel okay about it because I'm just going to try to make sure I don't go off the rails again. But the same thing. I mean, because like I look at all substances like that. I mean, like if you whatever you want to do, marijuana, cocaine, I don't care. If you can do it and do it like, you know, with some restraint, then fine, go ahead and do it.
yeah,
But if it's like if you're going to do heroin and then you realize, hey, I can't stop doing this, like then you have to try to make yourself stop somehow, right? I mean, like I don't know. It's just that's just the way my brain works. So I don't understand other people that end up going down that road and just losing everything and kind of like giving into it like that.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think even more than other drugs, the other substances, I feel like it's such a shortcut to feeling good that it just nullifies all other options. It's like nothing else matters.
Hmm.
This is your only option at this point. And that's just awful. You're really just sacrificing all life for the sake of that feeling.
Right.
Uh, so
Right. And then of course there's the idea that, it never is the same. It just can gradually gets less of a high, less, gets less good.
yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I guess maybe I can understand how that happens. I mean, it's just yeah, it's just sad. And
Well,
then
I
of
think
course,
that part of what drew me to all of it was, I mean, looking back now, there was pain at the root of all of it, this wasn't a happy person. There was pain there, and that goes back to perhaps divorce and living in that way that we did, with that separation and no money, a lot of turmoil. But I wasn't consciously so much thinking about that at the time. I was consciously thinking more about, like I said, like wanting to experience life, and diving into something so dangerous as heroin seemed like, actually, in some way, it seemed like a celebration of life. Like, let's go hard. Let's do the most extreme thing we can do.
Right.
Because then that somehow I'm going to learn from that. That's going to make me, that's going to give me experience and make me a more fulfilled person or something. And sort of backwards thinking, I guess. But
well, it's young thinking,
it's young thinking. Yeah.
Because when we're young, we're stupid, and we do want to experience things, and anything that we experience is part of like growing and learning. I mean, I think I think that's completely understandable. Like if you were a young person and kind of like got into it for a little while, I think it's even better and kind of a more reflective of your personality to know that you could walk away from it, and you can be a clean person.
I think I got very, very lucky. I don't even know. I was still in college at the time, and I had one summer that got pretty intense. And at the end of that summer, I just went back to classes and was just able to phase it out. And I managed to walk away, and enough time passed where it was no longer like a habitual thing whatsoever. And
right.
I was also so broke. There was no money to pay for drugs, which I think circumstances lined up. And honestly, I'm just very lucky that I was able to walk away, because numerous classmates from that school died, and others are in recovery. I really lucked out. I still drink beer if I want to. I got lucky.
All right, great, man. I'm glad to hear it. So I didn't mean to go down such a dark hole.
No, I love it. I love it. This is fun.
This album kind of brings it out, unfortunately, because that's kind of like it's heavily stymied and all that stuff, man. A lot of trauma, a lot of like existential crisis, a lot of drugs. It's all here, man.
Great. This is great. I've never spoken publicly about any of that, so that's a Vinyl and Vision exclusive for you.
Sweet, man. Cool. Thank you for sharing. So let's see. I guess wrapping this up. Thank You Boys is technically the last song. The original vinyl releases did not include Pigs and Zen.
Yo, that's news to me. I had no idea. Like I said, I got it first from my sister as a dub cassette, and then I bought the tape, and it was on the tape. So I had no idea about that.
Yeah, well, the vinyl version, I guess, didn't have it. I guess probably because time constraints. I mean, this is kind of a fairly long record, so that would make sense. But yeah, obviously newer digital versions of it and so forth, and the CD version probably has it. But so Pigs and Zen is technically the last song, I guess. Don't really have a question for this song. I just thought it was interesting because I found another quote from Perry Farrell about this song. It says, I read the Gita, I read Black Magic Crowley, the Bible, anything I get my hands on. If you want to talk about reaching nirvana, reaching Zen, well, the pig is closer than we are because the pig doesn't have material possessions. He fucks when he wants to, he eats when he's hungry, and he sleeps when he's tired. That's the whole point of Zen. That's exactly what pigs do. So, pigs and Zen.
I like it. So I like the simplicity of that.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, and like, as a matter of fact, I don't really like this song. Like, listening to it as a complete album and like following like the ending this album with this song, maybe it's because of the time, like maybe because it's my age and kind of like having all of this musical history before me, listening to this song, I was just like, this is kind of the most boring song on the album. It's kind of got like a very straightforward like chugging guitar riff. It seems like reminiscent of like what was like what kind of morphed into like the tradition, like the really kind of mainstream heavy like funk rock stuff. Maybe something like Incubus or like Korn. Like it seems like that's where those guys got that inspiration from.
Hmm. So I beg to differ. I think it's a badass song.
Yeah.
It's a
Okay.
pretty explosive, exciting song. He's got some cool vocal stuff, like where he goes pop 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 pigs.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
like
no, I mean there's good qualities to it, but it just irks me a little bit. Like where it's just like, I mean, because of all the songs on the record, this is the one that I'm just like I could probably do without that song.
Yep.
You know?
I hear you. I can't separate. To me, it's part of the whole story. But
Right.
I read a review. I think it was that Pitchfork review, and he said the same thing. He's like, I don't really like this one. This is a weak song, but
Hmm.
I don't agree.
Okay. That's fine. So but based on like what I had read you, I mean, would you say you're a pig?
I think I aspire to be a pig. That simplicity of living in the now and uh, the present moment being really the holy thing. Uh, yeah, I think I'm inspired by that idea for sure.
Right. Yeah. Simple living.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. Cool, man. Well, so I should probably ask you a little bit about your new record, Body Stuff. I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit. It's coming out in June, correct?
Yes, June 2nd.
June 2nd. Okay, so it's coming in, so right around the corner, basically,
Yeah.
from the time that this gets released. Now, so listening to that record, because you gave me an advanced copy of it, and thank you for that. Um, I, I mean, the one thing that sticks out in my mind that I have to ask you about is how did you get Tiffany on your album?
Yeah, crazy, right?
I mean, because
Crazy.
of all things, too. I mean, like, I'm not familiar with her career totally. I mean, obviously, as a young kid, I'm just like, completely like, kind of heartstruck by the idea that you have Tiffany on your record. But I mean, it's with it being like kind of like metal based music,
Hmm.
how did that happen?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I'm honestly so proud that I was able to pull that off. It's like I can't even believe it myself. But like I've had guests on all of the body stuff recordings. So and they've always been significant people, like good friends of mine. Or Matt McCauley from ARV Weapons was on the first EP. Um, Also, Greg Kramer, who played in Wet Nurse with me. Let's see, the second EP has Ariel Hall, who is the sister of Sky Hall, the person I mentioned
Oh,
earlier in an interview. You asked me if there was like a childhood friend who was also into cool stuff. Well,
right.
Sky and his younger sister was Ariel. And
Okay.
I happen to know she was a good singer, so I put Ariel on the second EP, and also Garrett Bosinick, who was in Wet Nurse with me as well. Also, he now is in a very good death metal band called Evaturn. And then on the third EP, I had Andy Blacksugar, who is now a guitarist in Blondie and KMFDM,
Oh,
who's a good
wow.
friend of mine. He lives in the neighborhood. And I also had, let's see, was there somebody else? Oh, of
Hmm.
course, I had Polly and Al, my good friends from the band 1-800 Band. They do backing vocals on that one. So those are the guests up until the new album. And good friends of mine, significant people. Um, and so for the new album, I had this song called Fame, and I knew I wanted a female voice on the song. And I asked a couple people, I asked like some of my favorite singers. I picked out two of my very favorite singers. Um, in this case, I didn't really know them well, but friends of friends or whatever, loosely connected.
Hmm.
Um, and both of them said no for whatever reason. They didn't want to do it. So at that point, I'm like, well, fuck, I got to go big or just quit. Like, I got to come up with something good. Uh, going back to those early days, pre Jane's Addiction, me, sixth grade in the woods in Maine, Tiffany's songs, especially I think We're Alone Now, that song was on heavy, heavy rotation on the radio. And at any school dance, they're playing those songs. Um, Definitely one of my very first crushes was Tiffany, 10 years old. Um, this is a very, very significant artist to me.
Yeah, I bet.
A big, big place in my memory. So just, by the crazy turn of events, but like my friend happened to have a mutual friend with Tiffany. And as I'm sitting there trying to think of who I could put on this song that would be just amazing, I remembered, yeah, I think he knows somebody who knows Tiffany. So I reached out and I was like, hey, absolute shot in the dark, but I've got this song. What would it take to get her on this song? And long story short, she said yes, and she did it. She recorded her part, and our voices are on a song together now, which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, huh? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So okay, so you didn't have to use any of your kind of like, like day job contacts and kind of pull some strings. It was just kind of like just
No, nothing like that. It was
friends.
a good friend of mine who had a friend who knew her, and it just went from there.
Yeah. So is she by chance a fan of like heavy music? But like, I mean, or is this just one of those things where she would want to challenge herself?
Yeah. So yeah, like me, like most people, I think we know her for the stuff in the 80s, which was pop. But she's turned into like a rocker and more of like a Stevie Nicks vibe.
Hmm.
And in fact, she had guys from LA Guns playing in her band, and
Oh
they
yeah.
might still be in her band. I know a couple of years ago that was the case.
Huh.
So I think she was happy to do something that was like more of a rock song. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool, man. Yeah. That's, I mean, so how awesome. I mean, like it's funny too because I mean, like, I didn't know what your connection to 80s pop was. So now getting to speak with you and realizing that, I mean, you're essentially the same generation as me, and so, those songs still do speak to you in a way, like some of those 80s what we call classics now. I mean, like you mentioned Bryan Adams and Aha and stuff like that. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's so infectious and like so much a part of our youth. It's pretty wild that you were able to nail that and kind of get her to appear on your new record, man. So congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel the same.
Yeah. And so, and I can't pronounce the name of the other band. Is it Zuzu?
Shoo Shoo.
Shoo Shoo. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. They only did the remix of one song.
Yes, correct. So New York in the Rain is a song that appeared on my third EP. And I guess in 2020, uh, I reached out to Jamie Stewart, who's the guy behind Shoo Shoo. And well, he and I had been talking for a few years, I guess. I'm just a fan of his work. And at some point, I just reached out and said, I like his stuff. And um, yeah, after that third EP came out, I reached out and I was like, hey, would you want to remix this? And he was into it. So
Hmm.
that song had already been done. Actually, before we finished this album, that remix had already been done. But I decided that song is so great. Like his remix is so great that it would make a really good ending to the album.
Yeah. Okay. And so speaking of the album, what is the plan for when it's released? I mean, what formats are you looking to release it in?
So, nothing digital.
Yeah.
Yeah. Down the line, it'd be fine to press something if that makes sense, but it's just digital for now. Um, some very cool stuff being talked about for summer, but nothing that's in stone yet. So I won't.
Right. Right. Okay. And what, like you mentioned that earlier, like I was mentioning your partner Ryan, right? What do your live shows look like?
Yep. So me on vocals, him on guitar, and a bunch of tracks.
Oh yeah, just backing tracks?
Uh-huh. Yeah, like drums and bass and some rhythm guitar.
Right. Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah.
Cool, cool. So that's pretty nice little compact setup, as far as touring is concerned, if that's what you're gonna do.
It's amazing. Like imagine being a drummer for so many years and having to move all that gear.
Yeah.
It's just such a production every time you play a show that yeah, now it's like literally one microphone and I just love that simplicity.
Yeah, that's great. I bet. I mean, I have heard it before from other drummers that are just like, I don't want to play drums anymore, just so I don't have to move a kit.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Hey, do you think we did it? I mean, like that thing felt like there was a lot of build up here. There was a lot of like, pressure to talk about this record because it's just so important to you, and I didn't want to fuck it up. I know that much.
Oh man, you did great. Yeah, like I just love the album. It rocked me so hard as a kid and it still does. And I think it's really interesting, like, 3 decades down the line to look at that and examine, why is it so powerful on me and it has this lasting power and why exactly is that? And
Hmm.
yeah, this has been great, man. You knew a bunch of facts that I didn't even know. And like,
I
um,
try. That's what I try to do.
yeah. You did your research. It's good.
Yeah, man. Well, cool. It's been a pleasure getting to know you better. Thanks for doing this. And I knew it was going to be special because you picked that record like that. There was no question in your mind.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is like the best interview I've ever done.
Cool, man. Yeah, it's a little
Yeah,
different,
thank
huh?
you for this. Really, thank you so much. I'm a fan of the podcast. I think it's such a cool format, and glad
Thanks,
you're
man.
doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.